Ladies and gentlemen, people often ask me, Simon, what's the secret to a successful marriage? And I usually smile, because I think they are expecting a checklist: date nights, communication, honesty, shared goals, emotion. But I'll tell you right now, those are tactics, and tactics without clarity of why are just routines, and routines without meaning become chores. We don't get married to fill a checklist. We get married because at some point we met someone who made us feel seen, someone who made us feel that we mattered, not because of what we did, but because of who we are. Marriage is not a contract. It's a commitment to a journey, and just like leadership, just like business, just like anything that thrives, it thrives because of trust. Trust that when things get messy, they'll stay. Trust that when we're at our worst, they won't walk away. Trust that the person beside us is not keeping score, but keeping faith. That's why we get married. Now, here's the problem. We live in a culture that teaches us to value speed over patience, efficiency over intimacy, image over integrity. We swipe right, we ghost, we compare highlight reels instead of building real connection. So we bring those habits into marriage. We think if it doesn't feel easy anymore, something is wrong. We think if it's not exciting, we've fallen out of love. We think if our partner's not perfect, maybe we picked the wrong person. Just like great leadership is not charisma, it's consistency. Marriage is the same. Success in marriage doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from giving what the other person needs, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. Love is not about what you feel. It's about what you're willing to give when you feel no in an infinite game. There are no winners or losers. Only players who drop out or keep playing. Marriage is an infinite game. You don't win at marriage, you stay in marriage. You play for the joy of becoming better together. If you're trying to win an argument in a marriage, you're already losing something more important: connection. Stop trying to win. Start trying to understand. Build safety, not perfection. What makes a marriage last? It's not avoiding mistakes. It's having the safety to admit them. The best marriages aren't between two perfect people. They're between two people who feel safe to be imperfect. Do you know what people in the strongest marriages say? I can be fully myself and still be fully loved. That kind of safety doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from daily choices. Listening without judgment, apologizing without defensiveness, showing up again and again, even when you're tired. So what's the secret to a successful marriage? It's not sexy. It's not viral, it won't get 1,000,000 likes. The secret is this: you choose them every day, you choose them when they're difficult, you choose them when life breaks you both, and you choose to rebuild together. Because in the end, the goal isn't a perfect marriage, it's a resilient one. A marriage where love isn't a noun, it's a verb, not something you have, but something you do, and that's not a secret really. We often ask the wrong question. We ask, what makes a marriage work? Or how do I keep my spouse happy? These are fair questions, but they skip the most important one, the one we should always start with. Why do we get married in the first place? Until we answer that, everything else becomes mechanical, a relationship checklist, a collection of tips and tricks that might keep things afloat, but never truly connect us to each other. Marriage at its core is not about stability or tax breaks or fulfilling some romantic ideal we saw in movies. Marriage is about something deeper. It's about connection. At some point in our lives, we meet someone who makes us feel seen, not for our accomplishments, not for our charisma or appearance, but for something more fundamental: who we are when we're stripped of pretense. That's rare, that's sacred, and when we find that kind of connection, something in us wants to build a life around it. That's the why. But here's where the disconnect often begins. We walk into marriage knowing how it makes us feel, but we rarely articulate the purpose behind the commitment. Without a shared sense of purpose, even love can begin to feel fragile. We start focusing on what we're getting instead of what we're giving. We begin to notice what's lacking instead of what's possible. And the marriage shifts from a sacred bond to a transactional agreement. But when couples are clear on their why, everything changes. When you know your purpose: to grow together, to hold space for each other's vulnerabilities, to become a safe place in a chaotic world, You begin to act differently. You begin to listen more than you speak. You begin to stay when your instincts say run. You begin to forgive not because it's easy, but because it's essential. That's what trust is built on, not perfection, but purpose. And just like in leadership, where people follow you not because of your title, but because they believe in your why. In marriage, your partner commits not because of a wedding vow, but because they feel a deeper alignment, a shared belief in the reason you chose each other in the first place. So if you're wondering how to make your marriage successful, don't start with tactics. Start with clarity. Sit down and ask yourselves, why are we doing this? Why did we choose each other? Keep asking, and don't stop until you feel that anchor settle in your heart, because a clear why can weather storms. A strong why makes hard seasons survivable, and a shared why turns two people into a team. That's not just the beginning of a good marriage. It's the secret to making it last. We live in a world of speed. We want answers fast. We want results now. So when something in our relationship doesn't feel right, we assume something's broken. We start asking ourselves, did I choose the wrong person? Or why doesn't this feel like it used to? It's the same mind that we bring to everything else in life. If it's not working quickly, if it doesn't feel good, replace it. But marriage isn't a gadget. It's not a subscription service. It's not a product you upgrade when it gets slow or inconvenient. And this is where many of us get it wrong. We apply short-term thinking to something that was meant to last a lifetime. We chase the feeling of love instead of committing to the practice of it. Let's be honest, feelings are unpredictable. Some days love feels effortless. You wake up smiling, their laugh still makes your heart skip. Other days it doesn't feel that way, you're tired, they're distant, life has worn both of you down. The mistake people make is thinking that those days mean the love is gone, that the relationship has expired, but the truth is, love doesn't leave, it just hides. And you have to go looking for it again, not in big gestures, not in grand vacations or elaborate date nights. You find it in the ordinary, in the effort, in the patience to sit in discomfort and still choose kindness. The real danger in marriage isn't falling out of love. It's growing indifferent. It's becoming so focused on being right that we forget to be connected. It's keeping score instead of keeping grace. That's what erodes marriages. Not a lack of love, but a lack of curiosity, a lack of humility. We assume we know everything about our partner because we've been with them for years. But people change, they evolve. So the question becomes, are you still learning them? Are you still asking questions? Still trying to understand the person they're becoming? When we stop being curious, we stop being connected. And when we stop being connected, we start operating on assumptions. We take their silence personally. We misread their stress as distance. We expect them to meet our needs without ever expressing them. And then we wonder why the closeness is gone. Successful marriage isn't about avoiding problems. It's about facing them together. It's not about never having fights. It's about learning to fight fair. It's about recognizing that your partner is not your enemy, even when you feel frustrated or hurt. The moment you stop seeing them as someone you're battling against and start seeing them as someone you're fighting for, everything shifts. So no, the problem isn't that marriage is hard. The problem is we were never taught to expect that difficulty. We were sold a version of love that didn't include the work. But the work is the love. And when you understand that, you stop fearing the hard seasons. You start seeing them as the place where real love is born. We often think love is about what we feel. We think a successful marriage is about mutual happiness, shared interests, or chemistry that doesn't fade. And yes, those things can matter, but they're not the foundation. If they were, love would collapse the moment life became inconvenient, and that happens often. People change, careers shift, tragedy hits. Boredom creeps in, and suddenly the excitement we thought would carry us doesn't. So let me offer you something deeper. Love isn't about what you feel, it's about what you're willing to give, especially when you don't feel anything at all. Great marriages aren't built on attraction alone. They're built on service. Not the kind of service where you lose yourself or diminish who you are, but the kind of service that says, I will show up for you, even when it's hard for me. That's what leadership looks like, and in many ways, a strong marriage is an act of leadership. It's two people choosing to serve one another, not because it's required, but because they believe in the value of the person beside them. When a leader walks into the room and says, how can I help? They earn trust. The same is true in marriage. When you stop demanding and start offering, when you shift from why aren't you meeting my needs to what can I give that might lighten your load, everything changes. And here's the paradox: the more you serve each other selflessly, the more your needs end up being met. Not because you demanded them, but because love is reciprocal when it's safe. When one partner feels consistently considered, they instinctively want to return that gift. But when love becomes a scoreboard, I did this, so now you owe me that, it stops being love and becomes a negotiation. And you can't build a lasting relationship on negotiation. You build it on trust, empathy, and giving. Now, some people will hear this and worry about losing themselves. What if I keep giving and I get nothing in return? That's a valid fear, but let's be clear. Serving someone is not the same as enabling them. Loving someone doesn't mean tolerating neglect or abuse. Service in a healthy marriage is mutual, not one-sided. It's rooted in respect, not obligation. When both partners bring that spirit of giving, that's where real love flourishes. It's easy to love someone who's lovable. It's much harder and more powerful to love someone who's tired, who's overwhelmed, who's not acting like their best self. Because in those moments, your love becomes more than a reaction. It becomes a decision, a deliberate, purposeful act of grace. And if we're honest, isn't that the love we all want? Not just to be loved on our good days, but on our worst ones too. Not just when we're easy to be with, but when we're fragile and human and unfiltered. That's the kind of love that doesn't fade, because it's not rooted in emotion. It's rooted in commitment, in service, in showing up, even when it's hard. One of the most transformative ideas I've ever come across is the concept of the infinite game. In life, there are two types of games: finite games and infinite games. Finite games have known players, fixed rules, and clear winners and losers. Think of sports: there's a start, a finish, a scoreboard. But infinite games are different. In an infinite game, the goal is not to win. The goal is to keep playing. The rules can change, the players come and go, but the objective is endurance, longevity, evolution. Marriage is an infinite game. The trouble is, most people approach it like it's a finite one. We argue to win, we keep score, we say things like, I did this, now it's your turn, or you always, and you never. Tactical language that belongs in competition, not in partnership. When we treat marriage like a competition, someone always loses, and eventually both people feel like they're losing. The healthiest marriages are not about being right. They're about staying connected. In the infinite game of marriage, the question is not, who's right? The question is, how do we stay in this together? That changes everything. When you're playing to win, the relationship becomes a battlefield. Pride takes the wheel. Ego makes the decisions. But when you're playing to keep playing, humility becomes your superpower. You start asking, how can we repair this? Instead of how can I prove my point? You begin to prioritize understanding over being understood. It's tempting to look at other couples and compare. We scroll through pictures of happy faces, vacations, anniversary celebrations, and we start to think, why don't we have that? But what you're seeing is their scoreboard, the highlight reel of a game that's still unfolding. What you don't see are the fights behind the smiles, the compromises behind the harmony, the nights they went to bed angry, but still got up the next morning and chose each other again. The infinite game isn't sexy. It's not flashy, it's quiet, it's subtle, it's choosing not to escalate a fight. It's showing up when it would be easier to withdraw. It's apologizing first, even when your pride is still burning. That's not weakness. That's strength, that's strategy. The most resilient marriages are not those that never struggle. They're the ones that never stop trying. They play the long game, they adapt, they grow. They find new rhythms when life changes. They reinvent themselves as partners again and again, You don't win at marriage, you practice it. Every day, you learn, you unlearn, you build trust in the small moments, through honesty, patience, shared laughter, and even shared tears. And the ones who last are the ones who never stop playing, because marriage isn't about being victorious, it's about being in it, together, for as long as both of you are willing to show up and play. If you ask people what they want in a marriage, most won't say perfection. They'll say things like love, respect, understanding. But when you really press deeper, what they're longing for, whether they say it or not, is safety, emotional safety, the kind of environment where they can show up as themselves, fully, honestly, messily, and not fear rejection, not fear judgment, not fear that love will be withdrawn if they make a mistake. That's what a strong marriage provides, not a perfect relationship, but a safe one. A place where you're not constantly performing or defending yourself. A place where vulnerability isn't punished, it's protected. The irony is, many couples spend so much time trying to look perfect, smiling in photos, saying the right things in public, appearing strong to others, that they never get around to building the kind of relationship where imperfection is actually welcomed. And that's a tragedy, because if I can't bring my full, flawed self to the person I've committed my life to, then what kind of love is that, really? You see, the goal in marriage isn't to avoid mistakes. That's impossible. You're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to mess up. You're going to have days where you're not at your best. The goal is to build something strong enough to survive that, to create a dynamic where mistakes can be admitted, not buried, where apologies are offered freely, not extracted after days of cold silence, where honesty isn't risky, it's relieving. Safety comes from trust, and trust is built in the smallest moments, the way you react when your partner opens up, the way you respond when they're overwhelmed, the way you stay calm when they're spiraling. Those moments don't show up on social media, but they're everything. Because they communicate something more powerful than any romantic gesture ever could. You're safe with me, even now, especially now. Now, let's be clear. Safety doesn't mean comfort all the time. It doesn't mean you never challenge each other. In fact, safety is what allows you to grow. Because when you feel safe, you're more likely to be honest about what's not working. You're more open to feedback. You're more willing to stretch and evolve, because you know your foundation is secure. Think of it like a home. A beautiful home isn't just about furniture and design, it's about structure. The walls, the foundation, the roof. If those things aren't sound, it doesn't matter how pretty the place looks on the outside. That's how emotional safety works. It's the hidden structure that holds everything up. So ask yourself, do I make my partner feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally? Do they know they can come to me with their truth, even the parts I may not like to hear, and I won't shut down or strike back? The couples who last aren't perfect, but they do this one thing well. They protect each other's vulnerability. And in doing that, they build something stronger than chemistry or charm. They build trust. They build resilience. They build a love that lasts. If there's one truth that every couple eventually learns, it's this. Marriage is not a destination. It's a journey. There's no finish line where everything finally becomes easy. There's no moment where you arrive at a perfect relationship and stop needing to invest. The truth is, marriage requires what most great things in life require: daily intention. You don't drift into a strong marriage, you choose into it over and over again, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. What separates lasting relationships from those that fall apart isn't the absence of conflict or difficulty. It's that one or both people stopped showing up, not physically but emotionally. They stopped doing the small things, they stopped noticing, they stopped pursuing. Think about it. When you first fall in love, you're curious. You ask questions, you pay attention, you plan little surprises, you listen deeply, and it works. But then routine sets in. Life gets busy. The same person who once made your heart race becomes the person you sit next to while scrolling through your phone. We assume love will sustain itself, but it doesn't. Like a fire, it needs tending, not once a year, not just on anniversaries or during crises, but every day. Small, deliberate acts of connection. Those are the things that make a marriage last. A compliment, a moment of eye contact, saying thank you. for something that's been done 1,000 times before, asking how their day really was, and actually listening. These things don't take hours. They take presence. They take a mindset that says, "You still matter to me." One of the biggest myths about marriage is that it's 50/50, that both people always give equally. But anyone who's been in a real relationship knows that's not how it works. Some days, one of you will be running on empty, life will have drained them, and on those days, the other steps in and gives 70, maybe even 90, not forever, but for that day, that season. Love is rarely symmetrical, but it is reciprocal when both people are committed not just to being loved, but to loving, not just to being understood, but to understanding. And when that becomes the posture, when you approach your marriage with the heart of a servant and the courage of a builder, something beautiful happens. You stop looking for shortcuts. You stop resenting the work, because you realize this is the work, and it's worth it. There is no secret formula to a perfect marriage. There is only the daily practice of showing up with humility, curiosity, generosity, and grace. Not because you have to, but because you get to. You get to walk through life with someone who's willing to grow alongside you. You get to be their safe place, their mirror, their teammate. And if you keep showing up like that, not perfectly, but intentionally, then what you build together won't just last, it will thrive, because love in its most powerful form isn't something you feel, it's something you practice every single day.